All right.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the the eighth episode of our. Well, it's not our eighth episode, but it is our rewatch of the eighth episode of season 1 of Wheel of Time. I am once again joined by the wonderful Christopher Navo. We are going to be discussing this episode, and I've got a lot of things to say, which I don't think is surprising. Got a lot of feelings on this episode. None of them are overly good. There's one thing for me that's good about this episode, but we'll get to it when we get to it. I've got to ask, because I've asked at the beginning of every episode, on a scale of 10, where are we landing for this episode?
Ooh, yeah. And you know me, as much as I like to try to be as optimistic as I possibly can about adapting things for television,
Yes.
but especially for long books like The Wheel of Time. This was just a hot mess. I mean, so yeah, it's 2.5.
Okay, we're in the same ballpark. So this is like the first episode. I feel like we're probably in the same. I think there might have been one other. I think for 4, we weren't too far off.
Yeah. 4, I think, was our other one where we were pretty much spot on. But yeah. I just had the rewatch. You know, sometimes when I gotta say, like when we were doing these rewatches, and doing these chats, I found a lot of episodes actually were growing on me a little more. Is that weird to say? You know, like when you first watch them, like when you first watch these, it's like, well, that doesn't happen. Where's this? Where's that?
Right.
You know? And then coming into this a little bit, knowing what was happening, and then trying to find maybe some better value from the episodes, I think changed a little bit some perspectives, but this one actually got worse for me. I think the more I watched it and the more angry I got. And I like to try to find good in these, you know, these TV adaptations, but this one they needed to go back and just redo this or something.
So I
would have been fine. Sorry, I would have been fine if they held off on production. You know, postpone the later episodes and then maybe film these at a better time.
So that's what I was going to say, because I feel like I obviously have a lot of issues with this episode, which we're going to get into, but it's kind of similar to the Matt narrative now, where we're dealing with post-COVID episodes and they had to change things that weren't going to be this way. So a big one apparently was the blight. The blight was like a chosen real location that they were going to film at, and then they had to scrap it because they couldn't do that. I'm also wondering if they were also going to continue with the plot line of having everyone go to the Eye of the World, but they didn't because it was too many people in one space.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you notice, the scenes are smaller. Like there's fewer people, but again, maybe not, because when the women all link together, that's like 5 people that are there. But I want to start talking about the episode because there's a lot to get through, despite the fact that it's only one singular episode. But when I watched this the first time, I lost my shit when the intro came in, because I thought we were finally getting the prologue from Eye of the World and was real excited. And that dissipates very quickly. So one of the positives I will give this episode, and there aren't many, is that I liked the actor for Lews Therin Telamon. So I feel like if you are familiar with the books, you obviously know that Lews becomes significantly more important as the story goes on. So it's pretty important to establish early on who Lews Therin is and have a good actor for Lews Therin. We should have seen him in episode 1 at the very beginning of our show, but alas, we did not. So I liked the guy that they got for Lews. That for me was a positive for this episode. One of the few positives.
Yeah, this was a remaining positive thing for me as well. And I think if what I'm hoping what they do with this Lews Therin thing is they slowly start having these scenes of him and slowly losing his, you know,
His sanity.
Yeah, because he was definitely pretty sane in this prologue.
But
and
that's
this
the
is
thing. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
and I was going to say, if they play that out, I think this whole, in the long run, I think this will really pay off.
It could.
This whole gradual show of Luz Theron and kind of mirroring Rand. Now, I do think they can't like expand it too much.
Yeah.
I think it needs to start being wrapped up quicker than Rand's journey itself. But I'm wondering if they're trying to do this like mirror of the two time, the Wheel of Time, and then having these two clashing timelines of Luz and Rand, and they're slowly hit into madness. And
it's possible, but the thing that's confusing with this is that there's two things. So if you're familiar with the prologue of Eye of the World, you know that Luz Theron kills his kid, or multiple children, kills everybody because he's gone absolutely insane and thinks that they're all still alive. So he can't be that far away from madness based on the fact that there is already a kid there. I'm like, it's close. So that's thing number one. Thing number two, well, there's actually multiple things, but I'm slowly getting to each of them. Thing number two is that he says, this is the day, implying that it's that day. And I'm like, there's a lot of stuff to go down today if that's the case. Like, you got to murder a lot of people, Luz. Like, it's going to be intense. So that's thing number two. Thing number three, and this is a big one for me. So I'm hoping that people will show up in our chat that are regulars here, because like I'm going to ask them if they do. But Luz, this is a lore question that I get very confused on. And people like to tell me that this is the case and then can't really back it up all that much. I don't think Luz Theron is the first dragon. And the reason that I say that is because when you read the book, Ishmael, my boy Ishi, Balzaman, keeps saying to Rand, referring to him as Luz Theron. And like that's consistent throughout the first three books. And he says to him repeatedly that they have done this 1,000 times before. Now we know that the last breaking, because they keep referring it to the last breaking, not the first breaking, was 3,000 years ago. And we know from it being 3,000 years ago that Luz Theron is the dragon from 3,000 years ago. So in my mind, I'm like, Luz Theron cannot be the first dragon because that just doesn't make sense. But then there's a part of the fandom that says he 100% is the first dragon. But then in this, they're referring to him as the dragon reborn, once again implying that he's not the first dragon, because if he's the first dragon, you can't be reborn as the dragon. So I feel like there's a conflicting lore thing in the fandom, and I don't get it. I just don't get it. And I find it very confusing when I'm reading. Like that for me is, and I've mentioned this to you, like it's distracting to me that like Ishi, whom I love, is very much referring to Rand almost exclusively as Luz Theron. And I know that as the story goes on, you come to learn that Ishmael and Luz Theron were good friends. So there's that kind of dynamic going on. But him being the first dragon is exceedingly confusing to me. So where do you fall on this? Because like I don't get it.
So part of me feels like a little bit I don't think Jordan maybe knew himself at this point in his writing.
Yeah.
Luz Theron was going to be the first or not. I think maybe this is like the first time the character of Ishmael met, Luz Theron, and this is their first time of clashing. Like maybe I don't think Ishmael had any predecessing conflicts with any previous Dragon Reborns. This is the first time he is with a Dragon Reborn in that 3,000-year timeline when Luz Theron was alive. So this is like the first time those two confronted. And from also what I don't understand, what also I think has happened previously, like all in all, I do think Luz was the first, because I think prior to this whole bore drilling and all of that, and the corruption of the male half.
Yeah.
I don't think that happens until Lews Therin's timeline.
It doesn't.
Right. That's so I do think so. Therefore, I don't think these dragons were coming forth until Lews Therin came along.
It just doesn't make sense to me, Chris.
I know. And I have a very hard time with it. I 100% see your point on that.
Yeah, it's
just there's some inconsistencies. Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't love it, and I don't love that the show has making it more confusing.
Right.
Because they're implying that he's reborn.
But I do think, Lews is the first of those dragons because of that, and because that's when the corruption of the male half started happening, and that's the first time I think we the future Forsaken have an interaction with a dragon themselves, because that's when their lives started. But and then when they turned over to Darkland, they kind of went through the whole recycling like Lews Therin did.
Right. I mean, that's kind of the only justification I can have to it, is that like Ishmael in his current state as Ishmael, but his spirit maybe has combated with like the spirit of Lews in like previous lifetimes or something like that. I don't know, but like it's so confusing. See, here we go. And then understanding he's not the first dragon. See, guys, this is so conflicting, and I'm like curious. I'm actually curious to see if the show handles this, because I feel like it's not clear.
No,
I think not clear.
Yeah, I think there's inconsistencies, and I just kind of think it has to do with Robert himself not knowing at the time when he was writing Eye of the World, comparative to like when T mentions when you get to book 6. And he's starting to say, okay, this is kind of what happened, so.
Yeah, it definitely was.
Yeah, because for up until Lews Therin, male and female, there were male and female Aes Sedai.
Yes.
And they were working together. That's why you had this very advanced civilization.
Yes, which is something we
need
to
talk about. Really,
yes. So obviously I'm not at that point in the books to understand the context of that. You and I have discussed it before, just in the sense of like, have I noticed these things? And I haven't, up until obviously looking outside and seeing that there's spaceships. That's very clear. I'm not going to miss that. So that's brand new. One of the other things that I found interesting with this scene is that it's not the Amyrlin seat, but the Tamerlane seat. And I was like, okay, is this something that's been lost over time, that it became the Amyrlin seat as opposed to Tamerlane seat? So like linguistically, I thought that was kind of interesting, actually, because stuff like changes like that generally do happen. So was okay with that. Not sure how I felt about the conversation, though, overall between the Amyrlin or Tamerlane seat and Lews. Because like you can understand what she's saying in the sense that if you risk the Dark One touching the source, then it's completely tainted. But as we know what goes on to happen, like the source gets tainted for men anyway. So like it's not great. And obviously it would have been interesting to see them fight collectively as opposed to Lews on its own. But again, this kind of then plays into the timeline not really making sense if Lews saying that that's the day that something is going to happen, and yet his baby is still alive and he seems incredibly sane. So
well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm wondering if they're gonna play it out so he's maybe his kids are a little older, maybe he has a couple kids or something like that, or so this happens gradually. But I guess my point is, how does the Tamerlane know something is going to get corrupted? How does she know these things?
Also,
it's never happened before.
When we think about it, if the source only gets corrupted after Lews, then why is Lews insane to begin with? Like, that doesn't really make much sense either. Because like the very prologue of Eye of the World is Ishmael saying to him, like, the madness has taken you already, and Luz being like, you know, calling out for his wife or whatever. So obviously madness is already assigned to men that use the one power. So I'm not sure exactly then how that changes following Luz. This is a lot of questions.
No, it is.
I've got a lot of questions.
Yeah, and this is one of those things where you kind of have to read the lore a little bit of Wheel of Time. I know there are a couple. I have like a resource book, and I was going to look that up to see if the answers were things. So I did not come with my homework on the past part
for next time.
Thing. But yeah, we always have season 2 to talk about this, because I imagine this is going to come up again, because they clearly left this scene with open for it to continue, and I think it
sorry.
Serious more, that's hilarious. But I think I think they're gonna continue to have these scenes with Luz Theron play out, maybe as a prologue or something that long.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see it. So we get through the prologue, or not the prologue, our intro scene, whatever. I see that this is the only episode, I believe, that's actually written by Rafe, who is the showrunner, which I think is interesting because it's hands down the worst episode. So
yeah.
I want to preface by saying, too, that after I watched this episode, I went and I watched a Sanderson podcast that he does with a friend/writer friend of his. And it was from a year ago or whatever. It was like right after Wheel of Time had ended. And he talked about his involvement in the show and all the things he felt that they did wrong, that they didn't consult him on. And a lot of it had to do with the last 2 episodes because of COVID stuff. He's like, I just wasn't involved. And like, I feel you can see from our feelings anyway, from the last 2 episodes, like things really derail and we're left thinking, okay, this is very, very awkward. But the episode starts with the blight, where we're not supposed to touch anything, but we're going to touch everything for the whole episode. Like, I don't know if there's a singular moment where they're not touching something while in the blight. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it was pretty ironic when she says that, and literally there's a branch in her head,
She's moving it with her hand as she says not to touch anything. I was like, this is the poorest time.
So I think what they needed to do was incorporate what they meant by not touching, like, obviously, really getting in there and feeling, or like, I mean, the floor is lava kind of thing, where you have to like just like hope for the best by putting your foot down kind of thing. Because they do, I mean, it is obviously mentioned when they're going into the blight in the books.
Yeah,
it's the same thing. You do, try to avoid things, but the majority of the land, when you kind of get the sense, like, I will say, I got more of a sense when I read the book that the blight was barren. There was vegetation, especially the closer they were to the borderlands, and because they were talking about deadly plants and animals and things that still lived in the blight, and just try to avoid those and just stick to where I'm, going, just on the barren land kind of thing. So, there is a corruption. I think it just needed to be presented a little differently. And I don't mind the way they presented the blight being this, over like grown. I don't mind the interpretation, but they have to say, it might, I think it was a little too much, to the point where it took away from like, don't touch anything, but I am like you said, we're hands
touching everything.
We're pushing shit out of our way.
We're gonna sleep on it and sit on it and lean on it.
Lean on it. Yeah, they were leaning on a branch. I remember there was a scene with Rand leaning against a tree, and I'm like, okay, well, you're kind of throwing all those rules out the window. And I think it might be like, Moiraine's way of saying, don't, I do like, at least they kind of played away with it, but it was like a dream at the same time where Rand wakes up and his hand is already like getting molded and green crap all over it. But it's like, I think I like the overgrowth, but I think it was a little too much. I think they should have had more spaces. I wish we had a little more, I wish we had it when they showed Malkier, which I really appreciate. I think it was one of the pluses I gave to this episode that
that's a good one.
They did show Malkier. I kind of pictured it the way they did. Of course, minus the overgrowth. There is supposed to be like kind of like a black lake around this city of towers. And I think there was even supposed to be some sort of like creatures that lived in that black, because one of the characters mentioned they saw some movement from the water, large movement or something from the water. And instead it was just, some more overgrowth things. Right. But I appreciate the nod. I do appreciate that they gave that nod to Malkier, and that was, like I said, one of the pluses I gave for this episode.
I agree. I liked that too. I wish that they would have been a bit sparser with the blight, because like you said, the blight in the book is supposed to be rather barren, kind of like almost desert-like, but with vegetation in it, and that's the dangerous part. So I feel like they could have still had these like weird tree things that they had, but like more spread out. So it was kind of like you had to be very intentional of avoiding them.
Like find a way to get through it. I mean,
but still,
because that blight, I think from what I understood, was also dangerous for like Trollocs and even the creatures that live there. So I would think the Trollocs would have a lot of that like cleared away, especially when you're moving a giant army through it to get to the gap.
Exactly. So we see them making their way into the blight, which we'll get back to because there was lots of blight stuff happening in this episode. And it jumps back to Perrin coming in to talk to Egwene. Perrin's mouth is open for like 95% of this scene. It drives me absolutely crazy once again, but I like the fact that they are good with each other. Like, it's another scenario in which the relationship building is good in the sense that she can seek comfort from a friend and it feels like a very natural thing. So I thought that was fine.
Yeah, I think we were kind of back into where they should have been the whole first place, is the friend with no awkwardness, just that natural chemistry of wanting to be somebody that you spent your childhood growing up with, and having that familiarity with somebody and a confidant without some weird ass sexual tension content or anything like that. And
agreed.
I felt like that is where it was in the books. I never read any sort of romantic relationship in the book. So I never got that tension.
I got a bit of it, honestly. I picked it up.
Except for Aram. When Perrin's reaction to Aram, I'm like, maybe it's his loyalty to Rand. I don't know, but I that was the only time I caught it, but I never really thought it was jealous because she's not with him, but more so than, maybe she's finding this acceptance in these tinkerers and he wishes he could. Maybe I thought that was kind of the jealousy aspect of this thing, that she's just like conforming to everything that they interact with where he does not.
I do think there are a few instances in the book where he kind of is longing for her, but he realizes that he can't because she loves Rand type thing. And I was like, because I remember after I read the first book, I said to my husband, I was like, I get it now, because I picked up on it, but I was like, but it's diffused because they put the wife in to the show. I mean, that's the thing. It's easy to ignore, really. Like, if you're not deliberately looking for it, which I was, because I wanted to see if there was any basis for it from the show. And
I think that's a good point you bring up, because you visited the book after you read or you watched the show.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious if I reread the book, if I catch those things this time.
Definitely. It would be interesting if you did.
I mean, I read that book like 5 times, but but yeah, maybe like you said, if I'm not looking for it, because I was never looking for a Perrin Egwene relationship. I thought the pairing was unique choice on Jordan's part. It's like, oh, you don't see and you didn't think of an interaction between Perrin and Egwene when they're all introduced. So I thought that was a unique pairing, but it never really dawned on me that possibly there was something there.
That's fair. We then shift over to my least favorite. And this scene has pluses and minuses. The plus is that the scene between Lan and Nynaeve is verbatim from the book. So those are quotes that are from the book. However, the same way I felt when I read it or listened to it in the audiobook format is that it's too soon. Like, it's way too soon. I get in the show that they've slept together, but Lan is now like this clingy boyfriend type thing that's like, I'm going to hate the man that you choose forever unless you want me to not hate them. And I was like, and I remember when I read it in the book, I was like, this is so out of place. Like, it just doesn't belong here. It would belong maybe in like a book 6. Like, that's how it would feel for me. You need so much more built upon this for it to be this intense at this point in time.
Yeah. I was bothered. I'm bothered by insta love myself, so I always felt like the relationship should have grown in the book as well, and I'm glad. The one thing I liked what the show has done is put more intimate scenes between Rand and Nynaeve into the play. And I guess what would help is they put in context how long they've been traveling together, which we don't really get.
Right.
In either format, either show or book. Now we know that it took them. Now the show did give that a month later kind of thing from when they were in the Aes Sedai camp to the Tower. That was a little bit helpful. Maybe a better relationship could have formed in a month. Yeah, some of the lines are a little too like you said, maybe a little too soon. Like, I would care about him leaving, or maybe would like to keep the relationship going that we have, and to both of these characters don't get those opportunities in their lives. So part of me understands that this is like they feel like maybe this is their only chance at some sort of love outside their devotion to Nynaeve, the devotion to her village, and her the other 4, and Lan to Moiraine and his cause. So I think the lines, but I'm glad they took something from the book, but I this is like the one point where I think they could have continued to play it the way they have been playing it in the show.
Yeah, and
it would have worked a little better.
I agree.
Because it goes back to Jordan just not being very good with building romance relationships in the book, I don't think.
Yeah, I completely have to agree with that. Okay, so we are now arriving at my only real plus for this episode, and that's Ishmael. I love him. I think the actor is absolutely fantastic. I have no notes for the guy that plays Ishmael. I think he really encapsulates how Ishmael is supposed to be in an antagonistic way, but also he's very much a smooth talker. He's alluring. Like, he could convince me to listen to him and hear him out. And we first see him when they're back in the blight, and now they're sleeping on it. And we have the scene where we don't know quite yet that Rand is dreaming, but they've thrown in this dream sequence. Now, in the book, we know that Rand is having these dreams the whole time. And a lot of different characters are having this dream or different dreams with Balsamon, aka Ishmael, in them. And they really stepped away from that in the show. I think we had the bat dream, like where they were in the early episode where they all kind of had it and all the bats were dead in the morning. And then other than that, I don't know if we've had another Ishmael dream. Maybe one.
I think Perrin might have had another one, but
I do think, Perrin had one. Yeah.
But and then Matt, we don't know.
Right.
Because I think they were trying to keep him under wraps, under like a mystery kind of thing.
Yes.
So I absolutely agree. And this was the other plus I had as well is Ishmael character. Now, I will say I'm glad they played with the fire eyes because he is mad. He is of the Forsaken. He's like one of the more chaotic, crazy ones, where the other ones I think are more reserved in their behaviors. But I kind of like that they took. I mean, this is probably going to get us to their later conversation with the lack of Agonar and Balsamon being there. So he's kind of role playing several Forsaken here, and I think it really works, and I'm okay with him being very sober and very charismatic too. So rather than like just this chaotic, nightmare with fire eyes and all that. So I like this a little bit of this version of Ishmael.
To answer this question, I'm not entirely sure if the dreams were blocked. Matt's got a lot going on at that point, so that wouldn't be the worst theory. I could get behind that, but we know for certain that Rand was having dreams basically like every night and like pretty much didn't want to go to sleep because he knew that he was going to have some kind of encounter. We also see, if you're paying attention to the costuming, that Ishmael's outfit is almost identical to that of Lou's minus the dragon sigil. So obviously like they've matched them up timeline wise, which aesthetically I think is a good choice. It's smart. It makes sense. And he starts referring to him as Lou's in this scene. One of the big things though that was in this scene that really was absent from the first season is he mentions the Heron Mark blade. And from the book perspective, the Heron Mark blade is questioned everywhere that Rand goes because people want to know how he's acquired this. And it further builds that tension for him as to whether or not Tam is his father, because anytime someone asks it, he goes, "It was my father's." And he goes, "Tam is my father." Like he says those exact words in his head over and over. Because he's so desperate.
He's very defensive about that. Yeah,
exactly. So desperate to believe it. And they play on that a little bit in this scene. And I didn't love that part being in this scene because I feel like Ishmael's not going to care.
I was going to say, this is like of the characters, Ishmael doesn't like. Ishmael knows what he is. So having a Heron Mark blade just seems like second nature.
Exactly.
Ishmael. Whereas, like any normal person says, "What is a farm boy doing with a?"
Exactly. With a Heron.
Ishmael's the only one who knows he's more than just a farm boy. So I thought it was an interesting, not in a good way, choice of having Ishmael being the one to discuss the blade, and I had that in my notes as well. So I'm glad you brought that up. But I was like, why? Like you said, why does he care? He doesn't care anything about this blade. He doesn't. He doesn't care anything about where Rand came from. But I do like the exposition that Tam wasn't his father. Maybe it made sense to give it to, because they cut so much else out from. Maybe it made sense to give that to Ishmael as exposition for the audience. But
I mean, I get that they're trying to maybe reinforce the idea that Rand still doesn't quite want to accept who he is, but they haven't. It's lacked the emotional impact from not having Rand like thinking about it the whole time. And I understand that because of the way they structured the first season and that they basically were hiding Rand from their audience because they didn't want people to know that he's the dragon. We didn't get the monologues that we get with Rand in the book where that is what's happening. but it's such a core part of his character that it's like it was lacking, and them kind of just throwing it in there felt a little haphazard for me. But I agree with you. I think like I can see why they made that decision, but simultaneously, I don't think it was a good decision for them to have made that.
Right.
But I will say too, like on a completely unrelated note, the guy that plays Ishmael, I think is highly attractive. And I think it's really smart to make Forsaken attractive. And then I thought about it afterwards and I went up to my husband. I was like, he looks like you. This is why I but
Josh is like, hey.
yeah, exactly. So but that I think is something that's smart because we'll see that more with Celine coming in season 2. But I thought that was a very good thing because it kind of adds to his charm. And then we can talk more about that when we get to the Dark Council snippet that they threw in at the end of the episode. But we then jump back to people. Another lore question. I'm sorry. Has the hammer blades carried all over the way? I don't know. I thought that was something new in this current age. That was my
that's what I kind of indicated too. I think like now maybe I think it derive a lot from like lands people, like if you were like you earned Heron if you were a fantastic swords master sort of thing, and then you got one engraved on your sword kind of thing. So yeah, I'm not too sure when that started, honestly.
Me either, but my general understanding was that it wasn't something that carried over from before.
Yeah. Same. Yeah.
Because Ishmael has been out, like he knows things, and that's one of the things that doesn't really make sense is that Ishmael. So something that's not truly explained in the show at all is that there's different layers, basically, of where Forsaken and the Dark One have been like locked in, and Ishmael wasn't locked in. He was able to get out, so he's been able to kind of observe what's going on. But as the Dark One's been getting stronger, Ishmael's been getting stronger as well. So.
Same with, I mean, and then book-wise, same with Agenor and Balthamol.
Exactly.
Because they even explain, especially Balthamol was like, so he got out and physically he like destroyed his body. Yes. So that's why he's like wrapped up in like all wrapped up almost like a mummy. Yeah. Agenor is like really described as really old. Yeah. Which is not a trait like you were talking about.
Yes, Forsaken.
They're very ageless, just kind of like an Aes Sedai. Yeah. So, but because they were all like towards the top layer, and getting out earlier, that's why these 3 particularly were all kind of messed up.
Yeah. Ishmael too is also stronger than the other 2, so he's going to be able to slow down that process significantly more than the others. But we get back to Angmar and his sister in the town, and this whole thing drives me insane because it's just wrong from the book. Like, this is where stuff, in my opinion, really goes south. Like, at this point, up until this moment in the episode, I'm kind of still on board with them. And then now I'm like, nope. Because first of all, from like 2 episodes ago or whatever it was, or last episode, when we meet Angmar, he comes across as a total misogynist and just not at all how he is in the book. So that was upsetting.
Yeah.
And now he seems really ignorant of war tactics and fighting Trollocs and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, this is foundational to these people. Yeah. He would never make decisions this stupid. Ever.
No. He was in the books. He's considered. It's stated over and over again. And I'll say to where you are reading now. He's alive too.
So. Yeah, definitely. He is. Yeah.
He is one of the 5 great generals of that world. Yep. He's Lord Algamore, and he's while you don't see too much of him for a while in the books, he's there, and they're in like a constant. I think the war in the Gap is like a constant thing after the world. It's a constant thing that's going on off screen, of course, or off book. but it's something that is still going on live.
Yeah.
And they just did these two characters dirty. I mean, and the sister, I mean, I don't think she has a really prominent role all in all in the story.
So she does a bit in the second book, though. The thing is that
she does
for information, by
but
Leandrin.
Yeah. So they just did this dirty. And you were talking about, I think you mentioned it. I want to see a separation of these nations, like when it comes to what people look like in each country. And I feel like the mix made sense in the Two Rivers because that is a combination of different people coming together.
Yeah.
In this nation of I can never say it's the long M name, whatever the Two Rivers used to be. You know what I'm talking about.
Manetheren.
Thank you, Manetheren. Yeah. And that is stated that it's a bunch of nations that kind of just settled into one place.
Yes.
So, but these other nations, I feel like we need to see that separation. I just feel like we're just combining, we're just gathering a bunch of actors together, just to form this thing. And I don't feel this. I want to feel this differentiality between these countries because Jordan really put a lot of effort into. Like I can name, like you name a country from this world, and I can tell you what the majority of these people are supposed to be like. The natives of these countries are supposed to be like.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would have liked to see more of that. I don't think we're going to get any of that in this show. I think it's consistently trying to be, look how woke we are. We have everyone of every race in the same scene, in the same place. And I'm like, I love that we're representing people, guys. Like we've talked about it with the Aes Sedai. Like I love it, but it's not realistic that every place in this world is completely mixed. It's just not. Like,
I mean, even if there are mixes, and that's fine. People, we move to different countries, we do things like that. But I feel like there needs to be like always like a majority.
Exactly. Which like I would have
loved. And you throw in once in a while, fine. That's great.
Exactly. But the one guy with the eye patch who's super white in Anglemar's army, I'm like, sticks out a little bit. I'm like, it's fine, but whatever. So one thing I also wanted to comment on is before we went back to them, Rand and Moiraine are talking, and he says basically, what's the plan? Like, you always have plans. What's the plan? And her plan is not to defeat him, but to put him back, put the Dark One back. And for 3,000 years, and then someone from 3,000 years from now can deal with this problem. I was like, this is the laziest solution of all time. Like, it's not really my problem. I could try to solve this, but we're just going to put a pause on this for the next person to deal with. I was like, this seems awkward. Like, it just seems awkward. Like, the buildup in the Eye of the World of the book really made it sound like they were going to defeat the Dark One. Like, that's the intention, to defeat him. And defeat in the sense of kill him, not in the sense of lock him back in a prison. So I thought that was an odd way of explaining it.
It's funny you say this because I'm like, I was trying to watch this last episode in the mindset I never read the books to see if it still is just a shitty piece of garbage that it is. And I was like, I know why they're going to the Eye of the World in the book. I don't know why they're going to the Eye of the World in the show.
Yep.
That's kind of
100%. It has not been conveyed at all.
It's like, and I even like when I watched it just today, I was like, why are they going here? I mean, I know why they're going there.
Right. But
because I have the book in my head, but show-wise, why are we going to the Eye of the World?
Exactly. And the book has this really great story with the Eye of the World because we have the Green Man. And we understand that to find the Eye of the World, you basically need a guide, and the guide is the Green Man. And each person is only allowed to find the Green Man once in their lifetime. Moiraine has already found a Green Man, which is why in the book she needs Loyal. because loyal Ogiers have a connection to the Green Man with their nature and the trees and all that kind of stuff. So by eliminating not having loyal with them or the group with them, which in the book, they all go to the Eye. It's not just Rand and Moiraine. We then vis-a-vis eliminate the Green Man story, which, I mean, I get why they would eliminate him. He's in it for a brief period of time and then he dies in this kind of sacrificial way. But in the book, it's really important because it feels very monumentous that this is like one of the last of this kind, if not the last of its kind, and it's died.
And not to mention, in this green world is where the Eye of the World exists. In the show, anybody, any Joe Schmo
can go.
Yeah.
If they survive the blight, which isn't hard to survive, apparently.
And it's not hard to survive the blight, you know. Apparently you're supposed to do the opposite, touch everything, and you'll get through fine. No, but yeah, that's the other issue I had was the geography of the Eye of the World is they established, like I said, anybody can go.
Yeah.
Whereas in the book, it was there was several factors. One, you had to sort of be invited to the Green Man's, world, paradise kind of thing. And then two, you had to have him guide you to the Eye of the World, even in this glade, glade. You couldn't find it on your own, essentially. Even an Aes Sedai, essentially, I think in Moiraine even needed his guidance, Laurel's guidance, like you said, to get to the Eye of the World. And I think it took away I'm trying to just understand the hardship of this journey. Like I said, it comes back to my question, why are we going to the Eye of the World?
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. And so when they get there, aesthetically, the Eye is very different from how it's described in the book. It's not really this like ruin. It has like a lake around it, if I remember correctly from the book. It's much more nature based, I feel like, than structural based.
Right.
So I don't hate this though, I will say, because of the fact that we have because it connects in the episode. It doesn't necessarily connect in the book, but if you're looking at it from a viewer perspective, you have the opening shot with the sci-fi scene that's going on outside his window. We see finally basically like a ruin that could be from that time. And you're like, okay, I get it. This must be connected to Lews Therin somehow because we've seen Lews Therin in the prologue. Ishmael, aka who we still think as a viewer is the Dark One, is now referring to Rand as Lews, and now we're in this familiar-ish place. Fine. The big thing, though, is when they get to this scene, we also forgot, Moiraine talks about the Sangreal to Rand, which Rand does not have in the book. That is not something he's given to go face the Dark One.
Again, I think, and this is the other problem I had, and we'll get to it later, I think, but don't these essentially function specifically either for male or female? Yeah. And this particular one apparently works for both.
Yes. Yeah. Clearly. It's fine because it's from before the breaking when the source was apparently all one source, despite the fact that Lews was already insane. But we'll ignore that. So got a lot of problems here. But we then have him get to the center of the Eye. He's walking around. He's realizing he's familiar with this place, kind of reinforcing the idea that the dragon is reborn with Rand, that his spirit is the spirit of Lews Therin Telamon. He's been here before. We as the audience see where Lews Therin stood and faced off with, again, who we're still assuming is the Dark One. It's not. And Rand then passes out and goes into this dream sequence. As of this point, all of this is completely different from the book because in the Eye of the World, there is, while he's encountering Ishmael, our other two Forsaken, we've got Agnor, and I can never say the other one's name.
Bothamel.
that show up, and our other group are basically dealing with them. Like Moiraine specifically is responsible for getting rid of the Forsaken so that Rand can go up and fight who they assume to be the Dark One. So when Ishmael shows up and stills Moiraine, which never ever happens.
So here's my question. I part of me thinks he shielded her from the source rather than stilled her. Neither of them happen. But I think because he says a line that says, how does it feel, just being
knowing it's at your fingertips, but you can't use it.
Use it. I think that indicates that she still has the ability to channel, but she's just shielded. Because
I don't know.
This happens a lot in the books where they
shield
people who can channel or block or whatever. So I do kind of feel like she's not stilled.
I would hope so, honestly, because if they do still her, that would be the stupidest thing of all time. Because
I agree.
Never stilled in the book.
It changes like literally quite a bit.
So much.
Yeah.
So much. And
so I want to say, and we don't get our answer, and I hope we do in the next season. But I do think
So I was actually going to comment on this. I thought it looked actually fairly similar to the stilling of Logain. In that Logain, you see the taint basically along with the one power being like sucked out of his body, because Moiraine doesn't have the taint because she's not using the male part of the source because she's not a man. It's just the one power that's kind of being seeped out of her. It's not as dramatic as Logain's was. But that for me was why I was leaning more into the idea that she was stilled, because it looked to me like it was similar, but I'm hoping that it's a shielding.
I think it's a shielding. I think Land would have felt something, even though he was blocked, because I think it would have affected him if he knew she was stilled.
Do you think so, though, even if the bond is broken?
Well, the bond wasn't, well, I mean, she had the bond blocked, right?
Yeah.
Well, she like physically, I don't know. See, this is the thing with this television show. It's like,
I mean,
they make up these new rules to this magic system, which we're going to get to later because I got some shit on that. But, I think it's just shield. I think because he says it's just at your end of your fingertips. I think it's a shield.
I hope so.
I'm hoping it's a shield myself. At first, I thought she was stilled, but I think she's shielded. Wow. Oh yeah, there you go.
Exactly.
Yeah,
we'll get there.
We can just do anything, right?
Exactly. So they jump back to our stronghold. We see terrible CGI now that the Trollocs are starting to show up. This is so bad. It looks like it's from like 1998, so that's questionable. But then we see that Min flees the city. So this, in my mind, has her going to Tar Valon, which is where she's going to then probably hook up with the rest of the group, because I think everyone in season 2 is going to Tar Valon, and that's where I think the majority and the bulk of the story will take place. For most of our characters, not all of the characters.
I think so too,
But they start, so we see that like the men are off, they're in the gap trying to get ready and like mentally prepare and all that kind of stuff, and the women are getting everything organized in the hold. And our girls need to go off because they can channel, but then they start digging for something, and they're digging for the horn. So this is wrong. Again, it's super, super wrong. The horn is the plot of the second book, which, as you know, you specifically, Chris, the second book has been my favorite of the 3 books that I have read substantially, like by a lot. I think it's the best one. I liked the plot of the second one. So they've really like screwed the storyline in a lot of ways by doing this with the horn. So that's the thing.
So okay. So all right. So first off, are we talking about the battle right now with the wall, or are we want to talk about the horn first?
We can because it then does jump to like the channeling women then like sort of getting ready in their non-circle-y thing. And then the battle starts happening.
I get it. This is season 1 of a show, and maybe their budget isn't that big where they can't do a lot.
Yeah.
But did you find that this battle with slow to recharge a crossbow to be like what?
Exhilarating.
to defend Terran's Gap, you have everybody using a slow to reload crossbow. And that's fine. You have crossbows.
Yeah.
I think people should be efficient in crossbows, but I think we should see some like pitching of
could be fire.
Something flammable. Yeah, something flammable.
Anything, rocks. Anything.
Regular arrows.
Yep.
And that's fine that spears to cover your. I mean, how are you losing to arrow slits? and then Agenor dies by the first flippin' Trolloc that enters. First Trolloc.
Yeah.
Dead.
First one. Hi guys, here, dead. It's really fast, and you're kind of just like, okay, because as the viewer, you're like, he's not that great, but in the book, you're like, what?
So somebody, I forget where I was. Somebody said he might still be alive. Do you think he's still alive?
Absolutely not. His face goes like this.
Does it go down? Okay. All right. I try to catch it, and I'm like, no, the dude is dead.
Yeah, he's 100% dead. That is dead. Unless, Egwene cries on him, and then maybe not. You never know. But yeah, dude is really, really dead. It's so dumb. And he plays an important role, as we said, going forward in the books, especially in book 2, because the horn is there, but at this point, we don't know that yet. So that's
he is the one holding the gap through the entire series of the book.
Exactly. He is so important, but now he's gone. So I don't get what that's going to be about. And then we switch back. We've left the gap. We've left the women who are doing their thing, which is dumb. And then we're back to Rand, who's now in his dream world. So here is something that is important, actually. This was a change that I was okay with, because when we're talking about season 2 and our girls going to Tar Valon to become Aes Sedai, there is a test that they have to go through. And in this test, it basically shows you scenarios, and they are tempting scenarios to make you not want to leave. And you can die in that scenario because things can happen. In season 2, or book 2 rather, when Egwene goes for her test, she sees Rand with a baby. So the dream sequence that they have allotted to Rand is actually Egwene's from book 2. And I'm okay with this switch because it's very clear from the way that they're setting up the Egwene character in the book that she's ready to move on. She loves Rand, but she trusts Moiraine. She trusts Aes Sedai. She wants to become an Aes Sedai. So that makes sense. Whereas more, it seems like it's Rand that's holding on to that idea of being a farmer, marrying Egwene, having a family. This is a change that I'm fine. If you're going to make a change, this is a decent one in this scenario.
I agree. I think this was another plus for me. I was like, what are they going to do here? Where, what is going to happen in this scene, since we've eliminated so much? We've eliminated 2 Forsaken. Yep. We've eliminated that confrontation. And I do feel like that was one of the things that was weak about the book. Was there wasn't, and I think we talked about this before as well, but there wasn't that. Everyone agrees that the Eye of the World can be very confusing. If
the ending isn't great. Yeah, it's not great.
It's not great. So I do like this scenario played out. And I'll be curious if they will still play out the same scenario
for
only
Egwene.
we'll have it in Egwene's mind, because they are still really keeping these two characters together longer than they were in the books at this point. Like they're still really close in a more like partnership kind of way, rather than getting into that friend mode, you know? So I'll be curious if they're gonna kind of hang on to the bond of Egwene and Rand longer than until Egwene really focuses on her studies at the tower and Rand starts meeting, you know, his other loves.
So a question I had, and I don't know if it's anything, we then juxtapose Rand's dream with the conversation that Moiraine and Ishmael are having, and Ishmael is taunting her, which I think is appropriate. Like he probably would do that. That's fine. And Moiraine says, you know, she'll risk killing the dragon, which like, no, she will not. They absolutely need the dragon. And he knows that. Like that's a bullshit thing. But the dagger that she puts to his throat has a symbol on the blade. And I couldn't figure out what the symbol was or if it was of meaning of any kind. Did you notice that?
I didn't notice the symbol, and yeah, darn. Do you remember vaguely what it looked like, or?
No, I really didn't get much of a clear image on it. I just thought it was interesting because previously nothing has been marked on the blade itself. It's been on the hilt of something. Like Matt's dagger has the ruby, and then there's the heron and things like that. So I just couldn't tell if like Aes Sedai maybe have like a specific dagger or something.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
I didn't think so either. So I thought that was a little bit interesting, but also so dumb because we know 100% that she's not going to kill Rand because they need him more than anything else. They've been waiting on him for 3,000 years, and they're not going to just say like, bye, we're going to wait another 3,000 years and see what happens. Like, absolutely not. That's just not how it works. So that was a thing. But then we see Padan Fane when we go back to the town thing, whatever we want to call it, Faldara. And this is completely different as well. In the book, Padan Fane is caught climbing over a wall and is then imprisoned for the remainder of the book. He's imprisoned for a good part of the second book. And his escape in the second book is interesting, actually. It's one of the better plot points of book 2. So they've obviously scrapped all of this, and they've made him way more influential and powerful from the get-go, it feels like. We see that he has the dagger. So there's that, right?
So, yeah. So what's totally missing here is his corruption. And his sort of like psyche is still like fully fledged intact. He's very calm, he's very collective on the way he speaks. It's almost like, and I didn't mind it with Ishmael, but I do mind it with Padan Fane. I think we have two of these. We have now two characters playing this cool, calm, you know, sort of like suave kind of character, and it's Padan is like obsessed. It's a very, and it is Robert, I think here really was taking a lot from Gollum from Lord of the Rings here with Padan Fane, and I think we're not seeing any sort of madness in this character.
No.
They talk about like even just being near him, just the unwashed presence of him, because he is still like, he's been, despite his alliance to the dark, he's still been like totally screwed over by them as well. Being in Shara Logoth, you know, being partly possessed by Mordeth. You know, he's not being taken care of, you know, by the Dark Lord in any way. So he's like in rags. He's like unclean, unwashed,
he's
and
dilapidated. In the second
both
book.
Literally and figuratively. He's like, he's a mess, and they're just taking a completely different role with him. And the other thing I don't feel like with him is I don't feel same. Yeah, I agree. And I don't feel any character connection to Padan that
100%. There has been no build
we
up to that.
get with the book. Why? Yeah, I mean, it's Padan Fane. We don't the audience, if they didn't want to read the books, they have no connection to this character.
No, none whatsoever. He had a brief stint in the first episode, and you go, okay.
Yeah. And then that's it. And then, like I said, there is a couple of blink and you miss them where he's watching the group, especially in Tar Valon. There's a couple of them, and it's just that smile and the whistle. And this is just uncharacteristic of him.
Yeah.
So what I hope in season 2, and I guess we can talk about what we have for season 2 at the end of this, but I do want to mention real quick before I forget. I was just like, I hope now that he has the dagger, we start seeing those personalities conflicting him and really screwing up his head. But I will miss the fact that there was a lot of cool interactions when he was in prison.
100%. Yeah, with Egwene especially.
Yeah, and we're not going to get that unless they catch him in Tar Valon and they have those scenes down there. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, they won't because
they won't because he needs the dagger.
Well, yeah, he's got the dagger and he's got the horn. So like that's done. So there's that. And then we get to I mean, it's got to be the worst scene of the show, which is the women. So there are so many layered issues with this scene that this is going to take us a few minutes to like really get through. So we don't know yet at this point in the show that when women can collectively channel basically, and it can be super and just overwhelming. We've talked about, being you and I, the fact that in the book, it's heavily discussed that women can kill themselves by not knowing how to control the source, and the lack of them talking about that in the show. So there's that. And we then have the idea that also in the books, burning out was kind of like you could sever yourself from the source if you burnt out, but it didn't kill you. So these are 3 background contextual things going into this scene. The scene starts with the Trollocs have broken through the gap. Egwene immediately thinks Rand has failed and therefore starts freaking out about that. And the sister who is leading this insanity brigade says that she's going to channel through them, and when she touches them to open up to her. So they all agree. We see this thing start to build and build and build and build and build. And Rand's biggest moment from book 1 is taken from him and given to this side character who's then going to die in like 5 minutes. What? Like, this is so stupid.
Okay. So well, where to begin? One, I like, this is the one like. I'll give you one like. I like that this is the first time we see the cross weaves with women. Okay. That women can get together.
Yes, they can combine.
They can combine bigger magic, higher magic. This is explained a lot in the books.
Yeah.
And even weak people like the 3 that they were there, none of those 3 were Aes Sedai.
Yes.
Nobody was Aes Sedai there. No. But they were able to do something. So that's the one thing I'll give is the networking of the power. As long as they had some sort of feel, some sort of touch. And we know that from the story that while they were all put away or cast away, saying that they weren't strong enough, they do have the innate ability to use it.
Yes.
A small amount. I there's just this unbelievableness to this well-trained army of Borderlanders could not hold back Trollocs, but 5 untrained women, 2 of which only touched the power once.
For like a month ago. Well, we know Naina has done it twice.
Take out the entire army of Trollocs. And and then the burnout, was kind of like literal.
Yeah, it was very literal.
I think from my understanding as well, maybe it can kill you. I think there is, like, if you go too far, like what's her name? Athena or something like that, Aletha or something like the sister.
Yeah.
I think in a sense she would have died because she's holding more power than she can handle, and I think she would go up like that.
I think that's true.
That something that does happen in the books.
Yes.
With
but these other women are like dropping like flies around her, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and I like the aspect. I do like the aspect that they show how addictive that is.
That
even for women.
Yes.
How addictive having that much power, and it is almost like a vampiric kind of force because you're taking it from these other people around you, and you are the focal force. Yeah, so I liked a little bit about that, as long as it wasn't the main thing that like stopped a horde of Trollocs and 3 untrained women were able to like take out this entire army. Yep. So that I had a problem with. The burning out, the and then the production value of just I feel like we were missing like some scenes, because you had this scene of Perrin talking with the girls and Laurel. Poor Laurel. I mean, this is another character that just got kind of just pushed to the side. All of his important aspects to his role is just like there. I think it's funny that the actor for Perrin is taller than Rollo.
Loyal just was shafted this whole season. I felt like, I mean, he was not given the amount of screen time that was really necessary to develop his character, especially for his importance in book 2. And of course, his importance at the end of book 1 was completely eliminated by them not going to the Eye of the World.
And then we have, and then the next scene is those 2 girls just coming out of nowhere, like onto the scene, like, we're like, I felt like it was like a weird like production thing, like it's like, you want us to just walk onto the scene, kind of thing. And it's just like, it was just really weird and awkward to me. Like
the whole thing was terrible.
You could tell, like, production wise, it's just like, all right, they just kind of walk out of nowhere. It just didn't make any sense to me. And it's like, how did they know what was going on? How do they know what they're supposed to be, part of or anything?
This whole thing, but we're not at the worst part of it yet, because we jump back to the Eye, and we have Moiraine and Rand here, and like stuff is starting to happen in the dream for Rand, in that he's starting to learn how to channel and touch the source correctly. And like I said earlier, I love the guy I think his name is Faraz, that's playing Ishmael. His voice is perfect. I feel like his charisma is perfect. He is enchanting in a way, because he knows all of these things and Rand knows nothing. So it's a good dynamic. I'm fine with this scene that they've added. Like, if they're going to do this, it's fine with me. But the dynamic of the conversation that's going on between Ishmael and Moiraine is kind of dumb, in the sense that he's starting to channel. What's it gonna be? It's like, this would never happen ever. Like, this is ridiculous.
I do think Ishmael would have just like eliminated Moiraine. I don't know.
He would have killed her.
He's not really the kind to toy with people. He'll come in and immediately just destroy you.
He's not gonna waste time.
That's his Forsaken. There are Forsaken that would play with their food, so to speak.
Yes, but he's not like that.
But he's not one of those.
No, Ishmael he's very much to the point, and
he
also
comes in and he will mess.
I mean, in the books, Ishmael comes off is way more insane than he does in the show. Like, they've tamed him, and I feel like that's probably better.
I do, and I think it's going to go back to the fact that I think they are eliminating Aes Sedai, or Aes Sedai
Forsaken, yeah.
And I think they're just doing a combination of several, particularly the male Forsaken, because I think they are cutting the number down. Now, I think my spouse actually said that all 13 were planned at some point. I don't know how that's going to work, since the especially the big parts for Agenor and Balthamar are out, but I don't know. We'll see how they.
I agree, Daniel. This is something we were discussing in the sense that Ishmael from the books is like absolutely insane. And he's definitely not that in the show. But I do think there are some things that are similar, especially in the way that he antagonizes Rand. I feel like that is very much book Ishmael.
Yeah, that is book Ishmael. And I don't, and like I said, and I like this little bit of change. I feel like we are at a point in modern fantasy where we need a little more of a complexity to even characters that are outright evil. I mean, Ishmael is outright evil. There's no redemption arc for Ishmael. There's there's nothing. Yeah, he is pure evil, and that's why there's a sense that he's always Rand always feels like he's killing the Dark One, because he's just like that.
I mean, this might be kind of what we were saying. We're combining people here. So we then have like a bunch of people being killed in the next couple scenes. So we jump back to this throne room where Perrin, with his mouth wide open, realizes that Padan Fane is here, and like gapes into this room with his mouth open, and then his mouth literally is open because it is Padan Fane. Surprise, surprise. And he sees that using the dagger, Padan Fane has stabbed Loyal and has stabbed all of the guys that were digging for the horn, which anyone stabbed by that dagger would be dead. There is no question about them possibly being alive. They would 1000% be dead. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is the backstory that Fane then offers is a very bastardized version from the book. And it is so bad that you're like, what? Because the book's dialogue is like a chapter at least. And then we have the ramifications of that for like a quarter of a book.
So this is where they start putting more elements of book 2 into book 1. But like you said, all of those cool, complex chapters at the beginning of Great Hunt, just unfortunately gone. And I loved those jail cell scenes with Padan.
They're so good. I really liked those. And I mean, they're frustrating as a reader because you're like, Egwene, how are you so stupid? But at the same time, it was really interesting because you were seeing the sanity level of him.
Yeah. I almost got like, when I read those, I was almost like Silence of the Lambs kind of.
I could see that.
To it a little bit. You're getting this like crazy nut job trying to find out about an even more crazier nut job out there.
100%. You definitely see that.
So that's kind of how I always read that. And I love that. I love this. I love the way those scenes played out. And it's such a lost opportunity.
I completely agree.
Especially for the Padan Fane character, because again, I feel like
he's really interesting.
He's just not interesting to me.
No, not in the show. But that's not the only person that dies or potentially dies, because I don't think they've killed off Loyal, despite the fact that he should be 1000% dead. But
beyond that, he's like that, like knife, like turns
like
in black
your soul, and is like that's it.
In black, and you like.
It's game over with that dagger. But then my dream happens for like a split second in time that Nynaeve dies, and I'm like, finally, like we can finally be without Nynaeve. Except that is not the case, because all of a sudden Egwene has become like the resurrectionist Aes Sedai, and has magical tear properties that once she blesses someone with liquid from her body, they're magically brought back to life, which is the most Deus Ex Machina thing I've seen in fantasy, because how are you going to explain this going forward? Because no one can die and then stay dead if Egwene is close by.
Like, so there's a lot of cool miracle-y kind of things that eventually unfold in this series. You just threw that all out the window by having a resurrection scene.
Yep.
Now some people are saying, oh, she wasn't completely burned out, or I think she was pretty fried.
Her face wasn't a face anymore. It was like a concave burned face.
Yeah. Now, yeah, I was like, all right, I'm done. I mean,
yeah, this was so
this
bad.
Is the part where, okay, it's fine to have an interpretation of a book, but now you are throwing her entire, you are now throwing her, the entire magic system out the window. You have people like, resurrection was never anything anybody could do. There's a way to do it, but it hasn't been brought up yet. And it has nothing to do with literally laying your hands on there. And plus two, Egwene is never not the healer. She doesn't have, not because, every Aes Sedai doesn't have the same power.
Yeah.
And if they were going by Egwene in the books, healing was not her forte.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's why she's not a yellow, or wasn't aiming to be a yellow. Like, sure, she was maybe wanting to be a wisdom, but healing is not something that is of importance to Egwene.
Yeah.
So this is just terrible. This is really lazy writing because it gives you an out for any possible thing going forward. And it also takes all of the...
So this
everything
right here. So Nynaeve was almost dead in the book Eye of the World. But this goes back to the Green Man. This goes back to that sacrifice that the Green Man makes, because I think Balthamol gets hold of Nynaeve and like is draining her
basically,
and like literally killing her, kind of the way she was dying here in the show. And the Green Man steps up, engulfs Balthamol.
Yep.
And he's able to overcome that and kill himself, but not without, going with him, So they both die there in the books, the Green Man and Balthamol.
Yes.
So the Green Man sacrifices himself for Nynaeve, but and again, this goes back to, if you just try to utilize some of the book material, you could have made that maybe a little differently. Play that out.
I mean, to address this, Patrick, I know you're one of our expert Wheel of Time people, but like, you can be okay with healing and have healing powers, but that doesn't make you like a Jesus type character where you're now all of a sudden having like a Lazarus experiment where you're like raising someone from the dead. That to me is just, it's not good storytelling in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. If it had been Nynaeve that did it to Egwene, that would have made a bit more sense. But also at this point, they've now given Nynaeve like multiple big source power moments, and that was already way too much. So this also comes back to one of my major issues with this show is this is exactly it. It kills all drama later, and they have to change their own narrative. But not only that, it's the fact that Rand wasn't given any big moments in this show. All of the really big moments went to female characters. And it's fine if you want to attribute some stuff to female characters or throw them a bone and like write a scene for someone that didn't happen in the book because you want to make it that the female characters are better than they are in the book, because let's all admit they're pretty terrible. So that's fine. But you need your hero and your protagonist to have moments of monumental meaning to show your audience that he really is the Dragon Reborn or the dragon, whatever. And to make him important, like to actually show what he's capable of. And they haven't done that at all, because they just keep saying, oh, Rand does this scene. Who are we going to give that to? Let's give it to this person, to this person. And I'm like, why does Rand not have a shining moment in the show? Because like in the dream thing that's going on when he says to Ishi, you know, Nynaeve wouldn't choose this for herself. Is that supposed to be his big moment? Like the fact that he's not like some total douchebag and he understands that the girl that he was dating wants something more for herself? Like, congratulations, you're not a complete scumbag. But that's not like the same thing of what needs to happen, you know?
And then it brings us to he's using the Sangreal to overpower. It's interesting. I will say it's interesting that he had the taint, and I think the actor did a good job with that madness starting to flicker in his eyes. I think the actor himself did a really good job with that. I do like that the flows turned white.
Yes.
To show that he's using more of the true source, rather than this
the taint.
Fane. Yeah. And but yeah, I mean, even the way Ishmael kind of dissipated, and he even had a kind of a smile on his face.
100%.
And I'm just like, okay. Well, clearly not dead, because I wouldn't be smiling. I just
no, and I mean,
if they made it a little more dramatic with that, like
they did,
like they faked it out, like he really killed him, like maybe a scream from Ishmael on his side, like some sort of like maybe I would have liked to have seen that's when the madness of Ishmael really
kind of comes out. Yeah,
when it didn't work, you know, what he wanted to do. Having it, even like you said, he didn't do anything. So if they made that moment a little bigger, you know, a little more dramatic, maybe that would have sufficed. But even that was just like you know,
okay. Like, a bit anticlimactic, honestly.
It was so and it was that was unfortunate. And then he had this Frodo moment where he was like, I need to go alone now, you know, and
I mean, this is true. And Patrick, this is what I've been saying about the Ishmael character of the show, in that he seems more well thought out and like put together than Book Ishmael, because Book Ishmael is really impulsive and kind of just like yells things, and that's I'll get you loose there, and if it's the last thing I do, like that's basically Book Ishi. And show Ishi is very much I'm in this for the long game type scenario, and that's really where that smile kind of comes into play, I feel like, at the end of the scene. But when Rand then says he's gonna leave and he wants Moiraine to say that he's died, this is another interesting thing, in the sense that if you are stilled as an Aes Sedai, you're no longer an Aes Sedai, and therefore you no longer have to keep the oaths. So her saying that she's been stilled and simultaneously can't lie, I'm like, these things don't coexist. They are very separate of each other. So that might be more leaning into your camp of the fact that she's shielded rather than she's stilled. So that could hopefully be a thing. Rand leaving, obviously, as we know, doesn't happen until book 3. So
and then we already seen previews where it's like
he's back.
He's back. Like,
I don't know how
he's
far.
like, I changed my mind, you know.
Yeah.
And then here I am in the last flipping city I should be
place
in.
I should be. I'm back in Tarval, like the last place on earth that the dragon should be. But I'm wondering if it's going to be a scenario in which he sees all of the bodies of the Trollocs or something and wants to go back to Faldara to see if Egwene is okay, and then leave. Which, I mean, sort of happens in the book in the sense that they're separated from the fact that he goes off for the hunt for the horn and the girls go off to Tarvalon in the Way Tower. But I don't know. I don't know. I mean, he's definitely.
I mean, they killed off everybody in Faldara. So I mean, essentially, I mean, who knows if they're even going to use Uno again, or I don't know. Somehow, Patrick, like you said, Egwene will cry into Laurel's face, and Laurel will be fine.
And it'll all be healed, and it'll all be totally normal again.
We can resurrect people if we want to.
Anytime we want to, has no consequence. But Patrick, our thinking is that he is in Tarvalon based on the previews that we've seen, with him talking to the Amerlin seat. It looks like they're in the White Tower. I hope I'm wrong. And I mean,
yeah.
There's been a few scenes that have been released, and I don't want to give away like spoilers if people haven't watched it or anything, but like
there's
based
a couple
on what
trailers out, but
yeah, so and like some scenes that they've released. Okay, I mean that would be interesting if that's the case. I hope that's what it is.
That might be
make more sense.
That would make more sense because the last place we don't want to see Bran is Tarvalin.
Is Tarvalin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the end of our episode basically is we have this little like nod off to Matt, which they kind of just had to throw in. So I'll give them a pass on the Matt thing because at this point I'm like, they had to do something. So whatever. The resurrecting is absolutely terrible. And we then have our final like season scene, which is the Seanchan. So there's a lot wrong with this, and it's also really dumb the way that it's set up. I have zero understanding as to why they felt they needed to send an entire tidal wave of the force of like a fleet of Seanchan on this one girl on the shore. Made no sense. Like
that was pretty. Yeah, that was pretty. That was pretty extra. Yeah.
It was so dumb. I'm looking at this and I'm like, is there like a civilization behind her that I don't see? And I'm like, no, it's literally just one girl in a bucket picking up shells. But okay, let's send our full force. That's fine. Aesthetically, the Seanchan aren't really how they're described in the books. The controllers are supposed to have like flames on their outfits, and the Domini are not supposed to have their mouths covered, but they are basically supposed to have a collar on them that connects them to the woman that's controlling them. So they've definitely gone a different way in terms of aesthetics for what they're planning.
So I noticed that and it's been a while. So Dame are the controllers, right? Or they're the slaves.
I think they're the slaves.
Okay. So they all have this like gold, like kind of like almost like a
harness almost.
Yeah, harness on their thing. It's not like an actual like
collar.
I would have expected more of like essentially like a dog collar.
A dog leash. Yeah.
Kind of thing. I like the fact that I don't know it, and then there's no actual physical
like controller. Yeah.
You do see the same gold on the arms of the other controllers with the bracelet. So I'm guessing that's the thing they clip on to control that harness thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting take on that. The mouth covered, I'm not sure if the collar does its purpose. Why is the mouth covered?
I don't know, because like that's going to be really weird.
It's a discipline kind of thing, I guess, where they don't allow them to speak, and it's kind of like almost like a muzzle thing. I'm going to
make things really complicated in their story for season 2.
Yeah, I don't know.
But they've thrown in a little boon at the end of episode 8 now, if anyone's interested, and it is a scene preview of season 2. And for people that are familiar with the Great Hunt, you know that the Great Hunt begins with the Dark Council, the Council of Dark Friends, which in the book is like hundreds of people. It's really overwhelming. Bors is the guy whose perspective we're seeing it from, and he's kind of surprised as how many people are there. The types of people that are there. He gives interesting descriptions of eyeless and the fact that they can speak basically the common tongue. So these are all new characteristics. The scene that we're given is of a modified Dark Council, a very, very modified Dark Council, in that it's probably at most 12 people.
Kind of like a literal kind of cult sense.
Yes, feels very culty. And it's through the eyes of a young girl who runs into this building because there's Trollocs outside and hides under this table. And from what you see under the table, that kind of gives you the hint of some of the people that are there by the way that they're dressed. And then Ishmael, my Ishi, peeks under the table and says, you know, like, we're kind of in the middle of something really important. And this, again, is really leaning more into the show's version of Ishmael that they've created, as opposed to book Ishmael, because book Ishmael probably would have just killed her and been like, I'm too busy to deal with you. So I actually really like this scene. I had good feelings about this scene because I think it does a good job of showing how they are trying to show Ishmael very maniacal, but also well planned and articulate. Like, he's very articulate. And I feel like for someone that's been alive for 3,000 plus years, you should be fairly articulate. So I actually like this scene. I think you like this scene too from the basics.
Yeah, I like it in a sense that we're getting a little more of I hope they establish more of the Dark Friends, we get more of these scenes, because Robert doesn't do a lot himself with Forsaken or Dark Friends, but when you get those scenes, it just really enriches the story.
Yeah.
Especially when we get into later books where we actually get a couple point of views from Forsaken, which is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. The one thing I'll point out though, the little girl, when she gets to her mother, you find out that they're Tinkers. It was just something I noticed because they're wearing the very bright, patchy clothes.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. And I'm wondering if they're going to be switching people's alliances and the Tinkers. I'm sure there were Dark Friends in the Tinkers. Maybe it's just to show that
anybody can be corrupted.
Anybody can be a Dark Friend.
Yeah.
I it's funny considering how much this season played with anybody can be the Dragon Reborn. In the book, I think it was established that it was still either Matt Rand or Perrin, because they put up all three images of the three boys in that scene, and in this scene we don't get that. We don't see the sees a Tinker. Yeah. And I like that. I like that they did like this whole, like, all cultures. I think we do see the Raven of Shinar, the country of Shinar. Somebody, we see the long liqueur nails of Seanchan.
Yeah.
And then they have to make it like an actual black ring of,
yes, for the Black Aja.
Because
and Padan Gain, surprise.
Yeah, they couldn't keep I think it would have been cooler, honestly, if they kept the regular color.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it also though would have given it away like immediately. I think that it's Leandrin. So that would have been a thing. True. But you never know.
But yeah, I like we're getting the intrigue and we're getting a little more of the other side of things. If it's a way of presenting Padan Fane more, great. More scenes with Padan Fane. Let us find out why this guy plays such an important role, because up until now, he's just there.
He's there.
Personally. He's just like randomly
doing so much. Yeah.
And I think an audience who's not read the books still has no idea why this peddler has any, except for being a Dark Friend. They know he's a Dark Friend.
Yeah.
That's all they know.
I agree.
But how does he control? I mean, he's walking around with two fades, totally unfazed. This was the other part. This was the other part of this episode that we missed that I just didn't really care for. Is Perrin's reaction to seeing a fade close up.
Yeah, totally normal.
They're supposed to be like the utmost terrifying. You're supposed to like pretty much freeze in place, and, be really freaked out by this, but totally unfazed. Two fades just standing there looking like sad henchmen, where I think Padman, I know they were afraid of Padan, but I don't think it was at this point yet they were afraid of Padan.
Not to this point, no, because at this point he doesn't have the dagger in the book. So I mean, like, he's
because everybody's afraid of that dagger. I mean,
exactly. But he's not as insane. But all in all, I think that scene was very well done. If they could do a whole season like that, it would be very, very good. But my hopes for season 2 aren't high, based on the fact that a lot of the plot is already changed. So I am curious to see how they're kind of going to write things. Curious to see how Matt is going to be brought back into the story and incorporated back with the group, because Matt's got a lot of things. It's not bad to have Matt in Tar Valon, just based off the fact that, but we're kind of jumping ahead to like book 3 of where Matt should be at that point. But there are a few clips that we've seen that have looked okay. So maybe there's a glimmer of hope for season 2. I don't know. I really don't know. What are your hopes for season 2?
That Rand grows his hair back. No. No, the same. The Great Hunt, I mean, you could say the same about the Eye of the World, was a very linear story. We're still, for the most part, we're all grouped into going into the same place. Even the girls, they get a little sidetracked with getting Nynaeve gets accepted. The younger girls, Egwene and Elaine get noviced, and that's fine. I don't mind a little bit of that play. I want to see. I'm excited when I saw the Nynaeve acceptance test. I was pretty excited to see that.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty good in terms of a couple, like you and I discussed it off camera, but like 1 or 2 of the people that are there, we weren't sure if, like, we know one of them is not there in the book. So that's a deliberate choice that they've made. But the language was almost verbatim from the book. So yeah, apparently he wanted to cut his hair. Okay.
But I don't know. So
it's not like it's a core part of his character that he has.
I never thought about this, and I forget who mentioned in the comments, but maybe Ram meets the ambulance seat in Karheim, or
I mean, I don't know why she'd be there. Honestly, like, that's definitely not something that happens in the book. So,
but the scene looked very Tar Valon. Like
I thought it was Tar Valon.
The scenery pieces looked like
I'm gonna rewatch it. Obviously, we'll have potentially some answers next week, but I don't know.
So what are your predictions for episode 1? Do you think are we even gonna be in Folder? Are we gonna be like months ahead of?
I don't know. We might do a little bit of a time jump. We might do a little bit of a time jump. I wouldn't be surprised if the groups have split, maybe. But there's a lot of explaining to do, because like we got to figure out what's going on with Loyal. We need to figure out what's really going on with Moiraine, and then we need to get the girls south, and we need to establish the hunt for the horn. So I mean, like, there's a lot of stuff. Obviously, there's still people in Faldara. Not everyone fled the city, I don't think. Like, most people probably did.
We never established who Ishtar is.
Yes, exactly.
So we didn't have an Ishtar yet. We saw Uno, but I think he was one of the ones that got stabbed.
But I think he's gonna live, because I'm pretty sure in the trailer he's like alive. So I mean,
another thing where the dagger is just a dagger kind of thing, apparently. So
this doesn't surprise me at all, Daniel. And this is, I mean, this is kind of what I'm expecting. In a nutshell, this is basically what I'm expecting for season 2.
I mean, they have to. I mean, we're so off kilter right now that a lot of stuff is going to. Now, I'm hoping the end gets them all back on track.
Yeah, I mean, that I think might be our best hope.
I'm in head, and I hope certain scenes play out for especially Egwene, because this is a big character development issue for Egwene.
Okay, we're wrong about Uno not being stabbed by the dagger. So there we
go.
So
it was just a bunch of nobodies that got stabbed, I guess.
I guess so.
I thought Uno was with them when they were digging up the horn.
Who's the eye patch one again? What's his name?
Uno.
Yeah, I thought he was stabbed. I'm pretty sure he was.
because I thought he was in the room when they were digging.
Yeah, there was the other guy that was with him, who was taller and looked.
Yeah, Lord. They made up some name for him. I don't even.
Yeah, he was there, and then Loyal, and then Uno. So, but Uno was in the trailer as well. So I don't really know. But apparently, like, no one stays dead in the show, so we don't have to worry.
Lord Yoktoda. I think he's a made up character.
He is, because that's not a name I'm familiar with, but at least not at this point. Anyway, a Fade Blade is still lethal, but only Loyal was stabbed by Padan Fane. So that we know of, Patrick.
I mean, it's true. The other ones could have been stabbed by the Fades, but
it's still lethal, like he's saying.
Yeah,
like,
it's an immediate death.
Yeah, it should be anyway.
Yeah.
But we will see. I mean, what are your guys' hopes for season 2? If you're watching this on replay, you can still let us know in the comments below, because I'm genuinely interested if people think that this is not going to be an absolute train wreck. But I'm hoping that the changes they make are sustainable. Exactly. 100%. Lacking characters. If anything was said about, Robert Jordan's writing style, it's that he's not at all descriptive and lack of couples. So I am curious to see, because it seems that Ishmael is going to take a more central role in season 2, that I feel that could probably only help the show. So that'll be a good thing going forward. I would love for Nynaeve to be less of a terrible character, but I don't see that happening all that much.
You don't think that? You don't think all in all, she was a less terrible character in this show than she is in the books?
No. I mean, she's like horrific in the books, in my opinion. She's like slightly less horrific in the show. The thing that I will give her,
I hope we get a whole season of Elaine drinking tea.
Right? I will say, though, for Nynaeve, the one thing I appreciated in the final episode in regards to Nynaeve is that she states that she left the Two Rivers to bring them home. And I feel like that is important, because it's the fact that she is emphasizing that she's like a healer, a caretaker, all of that kind of stuff. So I think that was a good nod that they gave in for her. And I gave that to her credit in the fact that then she tries to save Egwene in the end with that final scene. Like, that felt in line for a healer character for me. So I was like, that's good for Nynaeve. But Nynaeve basically being the Hulk is really not a character thing that I'm interested in seeing develop. Like, oh, I can use the one power when I'm really angry. Like, congratulations, that's all the time, because you're never not angry. So, like, it's just not a good character, in my opinion, where their one dimension is anger. So I'm hoping that if they're obviously not going to get rid of Nynaeve. So if they develop her in a more rounded way, that would be successful for me, because in the book, she's not that at all, in my opinion. She's very one note, at least until substantially later. So if they start to put those building blocks in place now, that would be better for me.
And that's why I think I appreciated the scenes they gave with her and Land, because it did soften her. It did give her, a bit of a softer side to her. Mm-hmm. I like also the scene in Tar Valon where she's sitting with Rand, because the relationship between Nynaeve and Rand is really important to the series. And I also think it showed, what her goal is. It's just basically, keeping these kids together, doing her best to still kind of be that wisdom, but knowing that she is kind of going to be going on her own journey now. Mm-hmm. And, she's going to have to step away from that kind of role. Mm-hmm. And if they play along with, like you said, they play along with some of these better aspects of her character, you probably wouldn't hate her as much.
Maybe not. So after we've now rewatched the whole season, so what would you rate the whole season out of 10?
Out of 10. Yeah, see, those episodes really take the average down, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. I'd probably be at a 4, maybe.
Okay, I wouldn't be that bad. I would probably say 6.
Okay. Yeah, you're much more generous than I am.
I
But we
am.
established
I
that
am generous. I take any kind of adaptation, especially nowadays. There's adaptations I think work, and some that don't, and some like just do okay and do really well. Like I haven't read the books to Expanse, for instance, but I think even just kind of how I'm basing my basic knowledge about the books to the TV show, I think the TV show was fantastic.
It was, yeah.
Of the Expanse. So now I'm curious, but of course I didn't read the books yet. So I don't know if book readers are like feeling the same way.
I can speak for one, and Josh definitely thinks that they are, and that they did a good job adapting it.
Okay,
yeah.
So it shows that they can put out good TV if they really worked on it. I mean, Game of Thrones, first 5 seasons were great, before they ran out of book material and they had to kind of like just wing the rest. And you can tell when they ran out of book material, clearly.
A little bit.
So there's definitely things I wish more for. I do think generally, for the most part, it's well cast.
Yeah,
I think the cast is phenomenal. I think everyone did a really good job. I think there was like just some great moments, particularly that come to mind that might not seem like very exciting. Like but I did appreciate it. Like the Tinker scene was beautiful.
Yep, I liked that too.
I think the scene with the warders just kind of getting an eye into the warder's head, because you don't really get warder material in the books too much.
Yeah.
They do seem like lapdogs in the books because they're not given, even Lan being a prominent character, he's a very secretive character. He keeps a lot bottled up, so we don't get to know warders. And I liked that scene. I like a little bit of that lore of the Aes Sedai play out, and so I like that. Logain, again, really fleshed out character, very similar to the way they portrayed Ishmael. I loved Logain, and I love that with that little preview scene. It's weird that Rand does, of course, come cross paths with Logain.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I'm spoiling anything there, but but this is a lot sooner than it happens in the books.
Yeah.
So I'll be curious to see how that is. But I'm pleased that they looks like they're planning to continue the Logain story, because it's very important.
You need to. He's important.
It's very important, and I hope we get more of Min's viewings. A little more of Min. Because I was always team Min when it came to
Rand's
ladies. Yeah, I was always team Min. So I hope we get a little more of her. I like her character. I
like Min too, honestly. She's different.
I think she's just one of Jordan's stronger female characters.
Which is hard.
Which, is saying something.
So just to give everyone a little bit of context, season 2 comes out on September 1st, which is this upcoming Friday. Chris and I are going to be continuing to do our live shows for season 2. We are going to do episodes 1 and 2 in our next episode, despite the fact that they are releasing the first 3 episodes on Friday. We feel like doing 3 in one sitting is probably going to be too much, and we would probably sit here talking for 4 to 5 hours, and I don't think anyone wants to sit through that. So we're not sure yet if episode 3 will be its own episode, or if we're then going to combine it with doing it with episode 4. Yes, Patrick, it is technically Thursday night.
Patrick, I'm definitely watching Thursday.
That's the thing. I'm probably also going to watch Thursday night, but then we will discuss it on Friday. So,
and it's gonna be interesting. Do you think are you gonna really try to go ambitious and try to rewatch it, or are you just gonna try to go off by just one watch of it?
I do it just off of one watch. I feel like that's generally all I need. If sometimes I feel a little bit more, I'll rewatch specific scenes, but it usually is abnormal for me to feel like I need to watch the whole thing a second.
And I think that might be cool. I think if we just watched this and then next year next year or a half when
season 3 comes out,
maybe we can revisit season 2.
We'll do our rewatch of season 2 at that point. But thank you all for watching, enjoying our season 1 rewatch. This has been very fun. If you are going to be watching this on the replay, please try to answer my questions about Lews Therin being the first dragon and the lore in general, because so much of this does not make sense. And I would love some background and information on that for people that are more well-versed in this than I am, because honestly, it is going to be a thing. Daniel, we are probably all going to have a lot to say, and I am so happy that you are going to join us for it, because you are one of our experts, and that's great. Hi, we hope that you continue to watch us because it's going to be a thing for season 2, but hopefully we see some improvements. Hopefully the few scenes that we've seen have been indicators of what's coming. Yes, please do watch it, because I have a lot of questions and a lot of comments, and not all of them are great, but I would love some clarification on that stuff. But anyways, guys, thank you so much. We appreciate you, and we will see you on Friday.
Thanks for your interaction, guys. We appreciate it.
Yep. See you then.
Bye, guys.